Okay, this is a story about having a child out of wedlock, which is probably not what they call it anymore because it's so commonplace. But I met my husband at a bar in Albuquerque back in 1985. We had danced together. My little cute friend, this is the guy that I then whatever we'll call him Mr. B. he he is my husband now. So he was with this guy watching sports, and that guy wanted to dance with my friend, so he asked Mr. B if he would, do dance with me. So we met then, exchanged some phone numbers, and ended up in about a few weeks having a date together, and we were inseparable. And I just was so impressed with this man, his simplicity. Of course, he wore really hot Levi 501 button up jeans, okay? And he had a Nova that he was rebuilding that was also super hot. So anyway, we became fast buddies. Ended up moving in together. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that my dad in particular was extremely religious, and he probably thought I was a whore anyway, right? And based on his religious standards. So he tried to get Mr. B. He baptized him in the bathtub, I think. I mean, he just like, he couldn't fathom that his daughter would be living with this guy all of a sudden. We just had met and we were moved in together. So he was trying to um, bring him to born again. And Mr. B came from a Christian family, a farm boy, just a good human. So different than all of the guys that I had been on dates with and met and been involved with over the years in California and Albuquerque. Just they're, you know what they wanted, right? Just not cool people, hardworking people. So anyway, Mr. B, when he found out that I was pregnant, pretty much freaked out. Okay, this is not a diss on him. Believe me, I have worked so hard over the years to move beyond that, and we are so beyond this. It's the story now, okay? But he just didn't want to have anything to do with me. So I didn't know what to do. I was still in college and working full time. And here I was at 25 years old and pregnant, and I had to move back in with my parents. The options, in Albuquerque, we moved to the west side where they had housing for single mothers. And well, you can see I'm obviously not Hispanic. And I was petrified because I knew what that side of town was like. And I'm not dissing on Hispanics. It was the side of town. It's like moving to West LA, seriously. So, and I lived in LA, so I knew, and I went to school with a Chicano population that chased me after school. I was petrified. So I moved back in with my extremely religious father. My mother was so accepting. She still has this beautiful nurse heart, and they accepted me back in. It turned out, even though Mr. B moved back to Minnesota, and I was with my parents, I saw something in my parents even after the birth of our son that my dad softened, and it was a tenderness I just hadn't seen. It changed him. The acceptance, I thought he was not going to accept this child because he would not accept that we would ever be even married in a church if I was to marry Mr. B. We could not be married in the church. He would not walk me down the aisle. Nothing to do with this heathen, that impregnated me. Right. But I'm just really glad that I had a place to go, that I wasn't completely rejected. And oh my goodness, just a feeling of fear that I had. I totally understand. how a young woman would feel, you know, just going to keep this child, right? And what do I do? What do I, you know, try and pursue the man and, you know, try and make it work out and force him and live in the stressful environment while I'm pregnant and who knows what later. Maybe I didn't really know him. I didn't know. Okay, so when the son was to be born, Mr. B just happened to be back in Albuquerque. I don't know what brought him there, if it's because I had been writing, okay, I had been writing care of his parents' home where I thought that he was living. I don't even remember how I found out, you know, but persistent little old me, you know, I found out that address and I would send letters. So maybe he knew that the son was to be born. So I spoke with him on the phone and I said, if you are there at the hospital, this is where I'm going to be, the University Hospital in Albuquerque, University of New Mexico Hospital, then his last name will be, well, what it is now. And if it's not, it would be my maiden name. It was a very, very hard labor and never showed up. So our son had my maiden last name. He's so healthy, beautiful boy. So I, over the months, took pictures and sent pictures to his parents' address, care of Mr. B. And I think that maybe the now mother-in-law saw some of those pictures and might have pushed him some to make amends and to be responsible for his child. So the reason why I was sending these letters was under the premise of you left an electric bill that was in my name on the apartment that we shared, and I don't have hundreds of dollars to pay this. You own up, and by the way, this is your kid. Okay, so that was the premise of all of my sweet letters. So okay, I knew that Mr. B had been divorced a few years prior. It was not a pretty situation and it was not of his doing. Okay, I'm going to keep it really simple at that because I am not going to, you know, pull other people's history into this. But it was not good, and he had two beautiful children. I think they were ages 5 and 4 when that divorce happened. And the reason why he ended up in Albuquerque is because he couldn't take it anymore. Everybody was hounding him and he couldn't see the children. This was a bitter woman who would not let him see these children and had done some really nasty things and lies that he would not leave. And he had tried. He went in the hole with legal fees. The lawyer didn't even show up, and even the judge knew that these were all lies. They found out in court that they were lies, but he had no representation at the time in Minnesota. It just goes to the mother. Okay, kids go to the mother, and it was not good for those children. Okay, so here he is in Albuquerque, completely separated from his family, his life, and his heartache that he has shared with me over the years, the deepest heartache of the loss of his children. It was like they were gone. They were stripped from him. Everything that he did was for those children. Okay, so now what he explained to me was, here's another kid coming, and I didn't even have my other two. You know, what if you would do the same thing to me? You know, and I wouldn't have this child. That the fear, the probably the bitterness and the anger, I don't know what all emotions he was going through, but that's why he left. He couldn't face it again. So the really cool thing is, and I call it the grace of God, honestly, is that he did positively contact me back, and we started to have phone conversations. And the letters that we saved, looking back at them, there were I love yous in there. There were I love yous. But I still didn't know who this man was. Why would you leave me? Why would you abandon me? To me, that felt like abandonment. And that bitterness and pain is what my heart held on to. Anyway, we were married, believe it or not, January the 2nd of 1986. So our son was just going to be turning 1 year old. His birthday is on January 11th. So Mr. B came out and he was going to marry me. That was the purpose. He had a one-way ticket. He did the DNA test. All right, so he came out early enough. He did the DNA test. Yes, this is your son. Okay, well, that's legit, right? If we've only been together for a few months, he needed to know that this really was his child. So we changed our son's name to his last name. So now he has daddy's last name. Super cool, right? Hey, so we got married by a justice of the peace. There was a newly sworn in justice of the peace, and it was just my parents and my brother that were there. And we took pictures at that ceremony in the justice of the peace office. And when I looked at the print, there is Mr. B standing in front of this picture of an Indian and wearing the headdress with big horns. So his head is like right in the middle of these big horns. And I'm thinking, is that an omen? Okay, so we married on the 2nd. We packed everything up in a little U-Haul, and in the middle of winter in Minnesota, any of you from Minnesota, we drove out in this little car with a U-Haul with our son, married, and moved into this little trailer house in rural Minnesota. So my mother had extreme separation. Oh, you know what? I know now that I'm a grandma, I know what it feels like not to be able to see your grandkids. But this child had been with them in my pregnancy and then for a whole year after he was born. So he was like their child. So I understood. My father was just bitter, just bitter. My mother came out about 3 weeks after we moved. She just couldn't handle it. And we were living in this junk trailer house because it's all we could afford. My beloved he worked so hard, many, many, many hours driving long distances because we were quite rural to go to work. So here is my mother in her PTSD craziness, chasing him with a knife every time, like chasing my Mr. B with a knife, saying, "Why don't you just kill me?" Because she was so mad that he would even lift up our son. I mean, he was just scared to death that he would touch him. So we endured 3 weeks. She just wouldn't leave. So finally got on a plane back to Albuquerque. And my parents ended up moving to our rural community after a couple of years. They sold their home because they didn't have any family there. It was no connections. My dad had retired, so they moved so they could be around our kids. Okay, well, I got pregnant right after we got married, once again within 2 months, Mr. Fertile. So we have another son together. So what I want to tell you, just knowing that he had abandoned me, right, or in my heart, that's what I knew. I had a hard time accepting that Mr. B really loved me. And I would say things, "Oh, when we get together, we have a home, it's going to be a cozy, sweet home." He would throw in my face that, it's not a cozy home, because I was always angry and frustrated and depressed. I got into a deep depression, being way out there in rural Minnesota with nobody and nothing, and feeling like this man, I don't even know who he is. Does he really love me? Does he just want me for sex? Is he just obligatory marriage because his mother told him that he needed to marry me? And we fought. We fought and we fought and we fought. I would run out of the house screaming. I don't even know what I was screaming about. It was just, so hard because he didn't know what he was getting into. I didn't know what I was getting into. And at one point, I was going to divorce him. And his mother came over and said, "You were not going to get divorced. You're going to work this thing out. You're pregnant with another child and you need to stay here. You need to fix this. You just fix this." So we stuck together, and boy, was there a struggle. You know, there are very tender moments that we had together. We really did, and boy, did we work hard. You know, to be a family. We did all these things together. I got my nursing degree, continued to work very hard. We always worked hard on the house and repairs, and he did so much, so much. And at the same time, after we've been married for a few years, even after a couple, you know, we need to fix this with your children from the previous marriage. And so we expended thousands of dollars. We were poor. We were extremely poor. Hey, living rural Minnesota, and I'm pregnant, right? And I really can't work that much. So we took thousands of dollars and got a lawyer, and finally were able to get some time with the kids supervised at first. It was just everything that we had to go through so that he could fix that in his heart, because that loss tore and tore and tore at him, and he couldn't give completely. Right? And I couldn't give completely because he was torn. So ultimately, we grew as a family. His two children came into our family over time, and it was good. And it was good. So my message that I want to give about lessons, you know, bar abuse, you know, and if a person is truly in an abusive relationship, that's just, you know, we're going to end up extremely injured, and the children will be injured. And I just don't even know how to word that, because so many people live through that, right? But now when we see shows like Teen Mom, and the baby daddy, you know, and he doesn't really know what he's doing, and she's like on her phone, and, you know, with all of her nails and her makeup, and, you know, and so many times we see this, that the father is just disregarded, and this child is raised without a father. And I'm sure that there's sentiment. It's so many different angles for all the many different situations, and to each his own. But my thought for me was, I am so glad I stuck it out. We fought like hell. We did. Yeah, I'm so glad. You know why? Because now our sons are married and have children, and the value that they put into their spouse and into their children and to building family is an example of what we did together to build family, despite our emotions and our angers and our feelings of resentment, moving out of that into areas of discomfort and saying, I forgive you. I love you. I don't know what that means entirely, you know, because love can mean so many different things, but I love you, and I love our children enough that I'm going to work my hardest to fix this so that we can be together as a family, so that we can be strong. And now, you know, just last night, we're in our 60s, right? Beloved falls asleep early because he gets up super early, and he still works super hard. You know, and I'm sitting there on the couch, and I'm looking over at him, and I just say, I just love you. You know, I just love you. You know, and we've been married for 36 years now. So I hope that those of you who are struggling in your feelings about your partner, your spousal unit, whatever you want to call them, that you take a moment to be tender in your heart and just really think about consequences, and think about your own judgments about that person, and where can you soften your heart? Where do you need to humble yourself for the grace to give them maybe something that they might not necessarily deserve. My husband left. I mean, Mr. B left me. That grace to say, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to give me a chance. I'm going to give us a chance for our child. All right. So, beauty in life. And I'm so grateful that I can appreciate that in this relationship that I have with my husband, Mr. B, and our children and his children. All right, thanks.